तव कथामृतम् तप्तजीवनम् कविभिरीडितम् कल्मषापहम् श्रवणमङ्गलम् श्रीमदाततम् भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जनाः भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जनाः.
Om Tava Kathāmritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibireditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Shrimadatatam Bhuvi Grunanti Ye Bhurida Jana. From yesterday, we have started trying to study the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna as translated by revered Swami Nikhilananda Ji Maharaj from the original Sri Ramakrishna Kathāmrita in 5 volumes in Bengali by Master Mahasaya or Mahendranāth Gupta or M. And we have seen that how it came about that Master Mahasaya had a impossible memory. We have not seen or thought or heard of any person having such memory. And when he used to visit Sri Ramakrishna, mostly on Saturdays, Sundays, public holidays, and other days also, and wherever Sri Ramakrishna had gone in Calcutta, also in Dakshineshwar, after he went back from there to his house, he used to, by memory, write down in great detail. We shall read about that. Yesterday, we were reading from the Wikipedia account of Mahendranāth Gupta's life, and in that we have come to this point where he talks about the Sri Ramakrishna Kathāmrita. He says, M had the habit of maintaining a personal diary since the age of 13. So that was all providential. M met Sri Ramakrishna in 1882 and, attracted by the latter's teachings, started to maintain a stenographic record of Sri Ramakrishna. Stenography does not mean that he wrote by shorthand, but like that, stenographic record of Sri Ramakrishna's conversations and actions. Conversations and actions, mind you, in his diary, which finally took the form of a book, Sri Ramakrishna Kathāmrita. Initially, when M began writing the diaries, he had no plans of publication. Regarding his methodology, M wrote, I wrote everything from memory after I returned home. Sometimes I had to keep awake the whole night. See the labor he has undertaken to write those diaries. So the value of those diaries in his mind. Sometimes I would keep on writing the events of one sitting for 7 days. Recollect the songs that were sung and the order in which they were sung and the samadhi and so on. Many a time I did not feel satisfied with my description of the events himself. I would then immediately plunge myself in deep meditation. Then the correct image would arise. That is why, in spite of the big gap in the physical sense, this story remains so fresh and lifelike in my mind because he has visualized that by meditation and read it as if it happened just now. In each of the Kathāmrita entries, M records the date, time and place of the conversation. The title Kathāmrita literally nectarine words was inspired by verse 10:31-9. Yesterday we told this from the Vaishnava text, the Bhagavata Purana. Both Sri Ramakrishna's wife, Holy Mother Sarada Devi, and Swami Vivekananda later testified to Mahendranāth's faithfulness to Sri Ramakrishna's word. This we read yesterday, both the letters. 3 letters from Swamiji and 1 from Holy Mother. The first 4 volumes were published in 1902, 4, 8, 10 respectively, and the 5th volume in 32, delayed because of M's health problems. The Kathāmrita contains the conversations of Sri Ramakrishna from here, 19/26, they have written, February 1882. Because what happens, that we will see that, we had seen yesterday that he wanted to commit suicide. And midnight he left his house. But seeing his face and all that, his wife followed him. So he had to drop the idea of suicide. But without going to his house, he went to his sister's house in Varanasi. And that is why evidently the diary was not with him. And so he has noted all the conversations of those 4 visits to the master on different papers. And because of that mental condition of his, he was not clear of the dates. And he has mentioned the dates as March. But the people have made researches. And 26 February, they have found out is the date of the first meeting. But because people have later on found out, so there is some doubt also. Mostly people agree it is 26 February. But it might have been 1 week before, Sunday. So it was a Sunday when he visited first. That means Saturday night he had left. So that is why it is written here 19/26 February. Okay. So goes away, Papa. From 19 or 26 February 1882 to 24 April 1886, during M's visits. Now, that is Kathāmrita contains this date, 24 April. But his diaries may contain some further dates. And that has been brought up by revered Swami Prabhanandaji Maharaj as the last days of Sri Ramakrishna. But he has just brought from the diary, not the expanded form which Master Mahasaya presents in Kathāmrita. So it is stenographic record, means points he noted down. So that does not match the grandeur of Kathāmrita. But at least we get some wonderful events in Master's life in Swami Prabhanandaji's Last Days of Sri Ramakrishna. I don't know whether that book exists in English or not. I told just now. But in Bengali, Sri Ramakrishna, what? Shesh Katha, Shesh Jivan. Ante Leela. Sri Ramakrishna Ante Leela is the name of the Bengali book. And in Hindi also it has been translated as Sri Ramakrishna's Ante Leela. I am not sure about the English. But I told that it is available. More than 24 April 1886 also. During M.Sc visit, the Kathāmrita is regarded as a Bengali classic and revered among the followers as a sacred scripture. Let me add here, who are the followers? Kathāmrita has a very, very wide circulation. And there is an event that revered Swami Bhavyanandaji when he was in England. And there was some special occasion. So he took a copy of the Gospel when he went to visit Pope in Italy. And he wanted to present him. Pope says, as you are presenting, I will accept. But you see on my shelf. And next to Bible was the Gospel. So, it has a very wide circulation. And it has been translated in many other languages other than English also. So, this is the nature of the work we are dealing with. It is mentioned here and revered among the followers as a sacred scripture. Now, Pope is not a follower, but it has, I will tell another incident now. I was in Chandigarh, and there is one sampradaya, Sri Ramakrishna, started by some Satyananda. And there were many gurus in that sampradaya, means authorized to give mantra to people. Now, one of them used to read this in the translation or English and attended my classes also. Now, another of the same rank objected to it, that our sampradaya teaches that we should not read books from any other sampradaya. And an argument came up. And the first person said, it is not of any sampradaya. Then in Hoshiarpur in Punjab, there was an old Professor Bharadwaj, and he was taken to be the authority by people of that sampradaya. So both of them went together to Professor Bharadwaj. And Bharadwaj was reading the Gospel. So whether followers or not, you see. And when they ask the question, Bharadwaj, see, I am reading this. It does not belong to any sampradaya. Understood? The name is given here. Famous translations of Kathāmrita include works by Swami Vivekananda, 1942, and Dharmapal Gupta. Yesterday I did not remember the name Dharmapal, and I offered my comment on that. Dharmapal Gupta and his wife Ishwari Devi Gupta, Punjabi Guptas. They were the disciples of Swami Nityatmanandaji. Nityatmanji, though belonged to the Ramakrishna Mission, spent many days in the company of Master Maharaj. And he has written 16 volumes of Sri Madarshan. In English also it has been translated. And he with their help, established a Sri Math Trust in Chandigarh. I need not repeat those things. Dharmapal Gupta and that trust itself believes that we should stick to Master's original words. And I offered my comment on that yesterday. I am not able to produce that letter, which I can at some point. Swami Vivekananda, some person other than Master Maharaj, wrote a book or pamphlet or something incorporating Sri Ramakrishna's actual words in Bengali. And Sri Ramakrishna came from a village and he maintained his village language, which to the city dwellers, civilized people, will appear slang language. And that gentleman produced that book with that language and sent it to Swamiji in America. And Swamiji scolded him in his letter that do you not know that Sri Ramakrishna did not speak like this in front of ladies? And don't you expect that your book will be read by ladies? And then he writes, see how wonderfully Master Maharaj has camouflaged it. I don't remember the exact word, camouflage. See how wonderfully Master Maharaj has presented Thakur's words. So it is absolutely clear that Master Maharaj has not produced Thakur's words literally. So the wrong premises on which this Dharmapal Gupta has translated. Okay. And the main book, as we know, is Swami Nikhilananda's. And yesterday we discussed another point in great detail, that the name Gospel is given by Master Maharaj himself. Before even the Bengali had come out, he had brought out two pamphlets, called them the Gospel of Ramakrishna, and sent it to America. Sent it to Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda was still in India only, 1889. And Swami Vivekananda highly appreciated them. And in the same connection, we said that he had some diffidence whether he should bring before the public. And even before sending the second pamphlet to Swamiji, in July 1989, he read out that portion to Holy Mother. And we read yesterday the Holy Mother's letter also. She said that you have written, whatever you have told about Sri Ramakrishna's words is the truth. And the world will not see light unless this comes out. So it is she who has prompted him to publish it. He had some diffidence or doubt in his mind. And then she writes that he had kept this in your custody and he is now bringing out. So he read that letter also. Okay. And we discussed the word gospel. Etymological meaning, because people say he has imitated the Bible. New Testament contains 4 gospels. Gospel word has become current in that sense. What is written not by his disciples, in the name of that disciples after many years. 4 disciples of Christ. And gospel according to St. Mark gospel like that. So they say Master Maharaj is copied from that. But Master Maharaj was a thorough scholar. And we read the etymological meaning of the word gospel. God spell. And God does not mean God. God means good. And the original word was good spell. and that long O, double O, became condensed into one O only because to suit that gospel which the four disciples have written. That we found from the online etymological encyclopedia we read out yesterday. So, good tidings, happy tidings. And so, what could be the, now it can appear similar to that. It is similar to that because that is about Christ. What could be the happiest tidings that God comes to live amongst us, to console us. We read through that shloka also, Tava Kathāmritam Tapta Jivanam. To console us, to give solace to us, and to lift our mind till we reach the end of misery. That is Amritam. So, this is the happiest news or tidings which man can have, that God has come in the form of Sri Ramakrishna. So the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna means this. And the name he was given by Master Masha himself. He brought out in 1907, those were two pamphlets, but then he brought out a book most probably equivalent to the first volume of Kathāmrita. Some selected portions in 1907 got published from Brahmavadi in Madras, and it had very flowery language. So original Master Masha himself has not followed, and we are more loyal than the king himself. So flowery biblical language, and then he himself thought this is not good. So he revised it, changing the language, and got it published in 1911 from the Madras Ramakrishna Math. And that continued till 1942. But then Nikhilanji's translation came out in 1942. So that book got suppressed. And some people demanded that. So in 1978, when Revered Tapasyanji was the head of the Madras Math, he re-brought out that. But he had to change the name. So he called it the Condensed Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. This is the history. Now we continue reading here. I want to read two portions. Now, then Master Masha is also known as the Guru to Paramahansa Yogananda. We are not much concerned with that. Later life and death. In 1922, M lived in Mihijam, a town 144 miles from Kolkata, for 9 months. Health. In 1932, when the fifth volume of Kathāmrita was at the printers, Mahendranāth died at his home, now called Kathāmrita Bhavan, located near the Tantania Kali temple in Calcutta. Kathāmrita Bhavan is a pilgrimage place for followers of Ramakrishna due to numerous visits there by Ramakrishna and Sarada Devi, and several relics associated with their life. So this we read from Wikipedia account of, yesterday we read the life portion of Mahendranāth Gupta. Then we opened another, that is, we shall read now from the Wikipedia account of the Gospel. Here, as a part of Mahendranāth Gupta, the Kathāmrita was given. Now, we'll read. Please bear with me. Wikipedia, this is the thing. From Wikipedia. The Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna is an English translation of the Bengali religious text Sri Ramakrishna Kathāmrita by Swami Pitambarananda. The text records conversations of Ramakrishna with his disciples, devotees and visitors. Recorded by Mahendranāth Gupta, who wrote the book under the pseudonym of M. The first edition was published in 1942, Gospel. Swami Nikhilananda worked with Margaret Woodrow Wilson, daughter of US President Woodrow Wilson. Margaret helped the Swami to refine his literary style into flowing American English. The mystic hymns, so many Kali and the songs are there, no? They are called the mystic hymns, were rendered into free verse by the American poet John Moffat. Wilson and American mythology scholar Joseph Campbell helped edit the manuscript. These are mentioned in M's book. Aldous Huxley wrote in his foreword, M produced a book unique, so far as my knowledge goes, in the literature of hagiography. Hagiography means biography of religious leaders. In the literature of hagiography, never have the casual and unstudied utterances of a great religious teacher been set down with so minute detail. Not that Thakur planned and gave a speech like that. Nikhilananda wrote that he had written an accurate translation of the Kathāmrita, omitting only a few pages of no particular interest to English-speaking readers. That we promise that when we come across, we will tell in Bengali. And stating that often literary grace has been sacrificed for the sake of literal translation. The book was voted as one of the 100 most important spiritual books of the 20th century by the American scholars convened by HarperCollins publication. Not followers, Scholars Lex Hilton, Swami Tyagananda, Somnath Bhattacharya argue that the translations considered the cross-cultural factors and Western decorum. That means for Western decorum, he has changed the language. But it is presenting the Bengali culture. Walter J. Newell, in his 1976 essay, The Transformation of Ramakrishna, writes that Nikhilananda's translations are accurate and reliable efforts. It should be possible to get as close to Ramakrishna's original teaching as is possible without a knowledge of Bengali, and to have an adequate degree of certainty about their meaning. Philosopher Lex Hickson writes, that the gospel is spiritually authentic and powerful rendering of the Kathāmrita into dignified English. Hickson writes that an eyewitness to the teachings of Ramakrishna reported somebody other than Master Mashi. That Ramakrishna's linguistic style was unique, even to those who spoke Bengali. It is a Kathāmrita Bengali, and it was not literally translatable into English at any other language. Not translatable at all. Hickson writes that Ramakrishna's colorful village Bengali, replete with obscure local words and idioms, adds to the difficulty of translation. His obscure local words were interspersed with technical Sanskrit terms from various strands of Hindu, yoga and philosophy, and extensive references to the complex realm of sacred history of the Vedas, Puranas, Tantras. So a lot of technical terms would come, and side by side that slang language would come. Scholars Narasingha C. and Jeffrey Kripal argue that some negative remark the Wikipedia must give, that the book has been borderized. She argues that the standard translation of the Kathāmrita by Swami Vivekananda is borderized, with the vulgar expressions in Ramakrishna's earthly, rustic Bengali either removed or smoothed over. Removed, you know. Master Mashi was a serious person. So throughout the gospel, in Bengali and English also, he mentions Sri Ramakrishna young ছেলেদের সঙ্গে ফাচকিমি করছিলেন, ফষ্টি নাষ্টি করছিলেন. That means he was indulging in humor with the young boys, and he has not any place given the details of that. So that is that omitted. So that Raman, example he used, Raman, meaning sexual intercourse, has become communion in the gospel. Now with God it is always called communion anyway. Now reply to that. Swami Tyagananda explains this as follows. When a Hindu hears or reads about Ramana with God, there is no idea of sex involved. Jeffrey Kripal argues that although Swami Vivekananda called the gospel a literal translation, he substantially altered Gupta's text, combining the 5 parallel narratives. 5 volumes you have described. Parallel. Parallel means the dates will be overlapping into a single volume, as well as deleting some passages which he claimed were of no particular interest to English-speaking people. He just mentioned it. Somnath Bhattacharya, Swami Atmajnananda and others discussed these concerns. Swami Tyagananda and Vrajaprana wrote that while introducing the Kathāmrita to the Western audience of 1942, Vivekananda considered the Western sensibilities and sought advice of his Western editorial assistant. We have seen all those names, namely that Woodrow Wilson's daughter. Western editorial assistants to ensure that there is no cultural fox pass in the manuscript. Such things which will not come, which will embarrass people. They also point out that literal translation is not always possible, which may result in an inaccurate meaning. Yesterday I joked and told you that pond with so many leaves, Pana Pukur. Literal translation, lake no pond. So it loses its meaning. Now, about this Nikhilānji himself writes, That I think I have given you the two references from the Wikipedia. Now we go back to our originals. What is this? So I have done with the external references. Now we come to Nikhilananji's Gospel. And this is the book on which I am going to take the class. Wherever necessary and important, I will tell you from the Bengali. And yesterday I told each may have book in his own language to follow. Now, in the English book, this is where the Gospel starts. But before that, in the long introduction, or rather, one thing is Huxley's preface, forward, but we have read about that. Nikhilananji's preface. We must know Nikhilanji's approach. I think you have read everything about it. The conversations will bring before the reader's mind an intimate picture of the Master's eventful life from March, he mentions, February end, 1882 to April 24, 1886, only a few months before his passing away. During this period, he came in contact chiefly with English-educated Bengalis. From among them, he selected his disciples and the bearers of his message, and with them he shared his rich spiritual experiences. No translation can do full justice to the original. This difficulty is all the more felt in the present work, whose contents are of a deep mystical nature and describe the inner experiences of a great seer. Human language is an altogether inadequate vehicle to express supersensuous perceptions. Sri Ramakrishna was almost illiterate. He never closed his thought in formal language. His words sought to convey his direct realization of truth. His conversations was in a village patois, Bol Bhasha. Therein lies its charm. In order to explain to his listeners an abstruse philosophy, he, like Christ before him, used with telling effect homely parables and illustrations culled from his observations of the daily life around. The reader will find mentioned in this work many visions and experiences that fall outside the ken of physical science and even psychology. With the development of modern knowledge, the borderline between the natural and the supernatural is ever shifting the position. Shifting its position, genuine mystical experiences are not as suspect now as they were half a century ago. The words of Sri Ramakrishna already exerted a tremendous influence in the land of his birth. Savants of Europe have found in his words the ring of universal truth. But these words were not the product of intellectual cogitation. It is not a philosopher's book. They were rooted in direct experience. Hence, to students of religion, psychology, and physical science, these experiences of the master are of immense value for the understanding of religious phenomena in general. Here the word master is for Sri Ramakrishna. No doubt, Sri Ramakrishna was a Hindu of the Hindus. Yet his experiences transcended the limits of the dogmas and creeds of Hinduism. Mystics of religions other than Hinduism will find in Sri Ramakrishna's experiences a corroboration of the experiences of their own prophets and seers. And this is very important today for the resuscitation of religious values. The skeptical reader may pass by these supernatural experiences. He will yet, suppose he does not dwell upon that in the gospel, he will yet find in the book enough material to provoke his serious thought and solve many of his spiritual problems. These are repetitions of teachings and parables in the book. I have kept them purposely. They have their charm and usefulness, repeated as they were in different settings. Repetition is unavoidable in a work of this kind. In the first place, different seekers come to a religious teacher with questions of more or less identical nature. Hence, the answers will be of more or less identical pattern. Besides, religious teachers of all times and climes have tried by means of repetition to hammer truths into the stony soil of the relevant. Sri Ramakrishna is deliberate. He says, yes, I will repeat. In the recalcitrant human mind. Recalcitrant human mind. Finally, repetition does not seem tedious if the ideas repeated are dear to a man's heart. I have thought it necessary to write a rather lengthy introduction to the book. We are not going to read that. In it, I have given the biography of the master, descriptions of this and other relevant matters which I hope will enable the reader better to understand and appreciate the unusual contents of the book. It is particularly important that the Western reader, unacquainted with Hindu religious thought, should first read carefully the introductory chapter, in order that he may fully enjoy these conversations. Many Indian terms and names have been retained in the book for want of suitable English equivalent. Their meaning is given either in the glossary or in the footnotes. The glossary also gives explanation of a number of expressions unfamiliar to a Western reader. The diacritical marks are explained under notes on pronunciation. The book contains many songs sung either by the master or by his devotees. These form an important feature of the spiritual tradition of Bengal and were for the most part written by men of mystical experiences. For giving the song their present form, I am grateful to Mr. John Moffat Jr. In the preparation of this manuscript, I received ungrudging help from several friends who have read that in the Wikipedia. In the spiritual firmament, Sri Ramakrishna is a waxing crescent. Crescent means Ditya Chandra, but it goes on growing. So, waxing crescent, Within 100 years of his birth and 50 years of his death, his message has spread across land and sea. Romarola has described him as the fulfillment of the spiritual aspirations of 300 millions of Hindus for the last 2000 years. Swamiji has made it eternal and 5000 years. Mahatma Gandhi has written, his life enables us to see God face to face. Ramakrishna was a living embodiment of godliness. He is being recognized as a compeer of Krishna, Buddha and Christ. The life and teachings of Sri Ramakrishna have redirected the thoughts of the denationalized Hindus in the spiritual ideals of their forefathers. During the latter part of the 19th century, his was the time-honored role of the savior of the eternal religion of the Hindus. His teachings played an important part in liberalizing the minds of orthodox pandits and hermits. They appear to be contracted. He liberalized them. Even now, he is the silent force that is molding the spiritual destiny of India. His great disciple Swami Vivekananda was the first Hindu missionary to preach the message of Indian culture to the enlightened minds of Europe and America. The full consequence of Swami Vivekananda's work is still in the womb of the future. May this translation of the first book of its kind in the religious history of the world, being the record of the direct words of a prophet, help stricken humanity to come nearer to the eternal verity of life and remove dissension and quarrel from among the different faiths. May it enable seekers of truth to grasp the subtle laws of the supersensuous realm and unfold before man's restricted vision the spiritual foundation of the universe, the unity of existence and the divinity of the soul. Now, one more point remains, and that is the life of Sri Ramakrishna we are not going to read because we have just now completed the Great Master and we are more concerned with his teachings in the Gospel. And in the Gospel himself talks about his life also. But the description of Dakshineshwar temple garden is also included in Master Macha's Kathāmrita. And Nikhilanji has not translated that, but he has his own description in the introduction. Now, in place of that, I will try a small experiment. The map, old map of Dakshineshwar garden, I don't know whether it will reach you or not. I am making an experiment. देखो हाँ तुम्हारे इधर आ रहा है कि देखो Is it coming? Then I will explain. It is not coming. Okay. It is not coming. Because the video light is on. That is why I go. But it is not coming. Okay. Okay. So, we will describe it as necessary at those times. Okay. So, we come back to our so we start reading the Gospel. Now in the Bengali, it is the Dvitiya Parichet, Pratham Darshan. Because the Pratham Parichad is Dakshineshwar description. Okay. And in English, because the description is gone in the introduction, so it is the start of the gospel. So this, the heading of the first chapter is Master and Disciple. About the headings, Nikhilanji has explained that the Bengali, because it is split in 5 volumes, and he has to make it chronological. So the old headings will not remain. So he has himself given the approximate headings. One more slightly disadvantage we have in this, that Master in the Kathāmrita has given so many headings for these subsections. That will be missing here. And in the contents we find those given. Anyway, so that will be slightly disadvantageous. And in the beginning, in the first volume of his Kathāmrita, he has given an apt Sanskrit shloka at the beginning of every section. That will be missing here. Okay. So as we see parallel Bengali, we will tell them whenever possible. So with this introduction, we start reading. And I like to chant the shloka again here. Om Tava Kathāmritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibiriditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Srimadatam Bhuvignantiye Bhuridajana. Master and disciple. It has been corrected in the heading to February 1882. It was on a Sunday in spring. Master Masha has written all this so that we'll catch the date approximately. Because he wants to show it as a historical record, not legendary something. It was on a Sunday in spring, a few days after Sri Ramakrishna's birthday. That is, blessing. That M met him the first time. Sri Ramakrishna lived at the Kalibadi, the temple garden of Mother Kali, on the bank of the Ganges at Dakshineshwar. Dakshineshwar is the name of a village in the north of Calcutta. M, being at leisure on Sundays, had gone with his friend Sidhu to visit several gardens in Baranagar. Now we know that it is not simply a Sunday and leisure. We have known that history. And Master Maharshi is not going to present that history literally in the beginning of the people. But we know that. And Master Maharshi later on said, I went for committing suicide and I got my life, the nectar of my life. So, M, being at leisure on Sundays, had gone with his friend Sidhu. Siddheshwar Muzumdar is the name. And in some places it is mentioned Master Maharashi's nephew. Here he says friend, to visit several gardens at Baranagar. So Baranagar is north of Calcutta, between Calcutta and Dakshineshwar. And here, as we found, he lived with his elder sister. Till his mind became normal and he went back to his house. As they were walking in Prasanna Banerjee's garden, Sidhu said, there is a charming place on the bank of the Ganges where a Paramahamsa lives. One small correction will be better. Not only a charming place, but a charming garden. Because they were moving from garden to garden, and why? That I have described yesterday. That a depressed mind feels somewhat elated, better in the company of trees and flowers. There, and it is spring. So they are all fresh, sweet smelling, beautiful in appearance. So that raises the mind to some extent. I remember a funny incident here. In my B.Sc examination, now some friends of mine have spoiled some paper and like that. There is a lot of wave of depression or dejection. So I would get up in the morning, call them from their house. Just outside the city, the palace of Gwalior is famous. And the boundary of the palace is there. And just within the boundary, there are very sweet smelling trees. Especially what is called the green champak. It has the other name, Mother Mast. It has a terrible, intoxicating sweet smell. So some of the smell would come out. So I would tell my friends, come, let us go to smell the green champak. And I would take them. So gardens, we could not see the beauty, but the fragrance. That has an effect. So Siddheshwar thought, let me take him to garden. Now, they are walking, going north. So they have come very near Dakshineshwar garden. And Dakshineshwar, he tells three things, which may enliven the master's mind. He says, there is a charming garden on the bank of the Ganges where a Paramahansa lives. Ganges, one thing. Garden and Paramahansa. Paramahansa is a man who is of an elevated type, so that may help raising the mind. With these three ideas, he said, and Master accepted. Should you like to go there? M assented, and they started immediately for the Dakshineshwar temple garden. Here garden is mentioned. They arrived at the main gate at dusk and went straight to Sri Ramakrishna's room. That is the fun. Neither garden nor Ganges. Entered the gate and went straight to Sri Ramakrishna's room. That is the destiny. And there they found him seated on a wooden coach facing the east. That picture came in the beginning. In the Advaita Ashram setup of the lecture, they have shown Sri Ramakrishna's room with the two bedsteads. So, on the smaller bedstead, he was sitting, facing the east. Now, Master describes all these things so that we can meditate on those scenes. With a smile on his face, he was talking of God. Now he will describe several situations, facing east, facing west, sitting in the room, sitting in the veranda, in Balram Babu's house, in Pran Krishna's house. But this thing will follow us from page 1 to last. Smiling face. So, God is Satchid Ananda, and that shows on his smiling face. And we have been advised by our gurus, when we meditate on the Ishtam, we should always visualize him as happy and illumined. So, that is the feature of Sri Ramakrishna. And talking of God, that was his only business. The room was full of people, all seated on the floor, drinking in his words in deep silence. Deep silence because they don't want to disturb it. And the process of absorption has been described by Master Masha as drinking. Okay? So, we take up the actual conversations from tomorrow. So today we have been able to deal with introduction from all sides, and today we have made a start of reading the gospel. We have not yet come across the conversation. But in the setting, we have reached there with Master Masha and Siddheshwar. Om Tava Kathāmritam Tapta Jivanam Kavibireditam Kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Shrimadatam Guivinantiye Bhurida Jana. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hare Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.